There are 5 neighborhoods in Toronto that without fail, every buyer tells me they want to live in. On the east end, it's Leslieville and the Beaches. On the west end, it's Roncesvalles and High Park. And a bit north, we're talking about North Toronto. And the reason why I didn't add in Rosedale or Forest Hill or the Bridle Path, because they're at another upper echelon where it just costs so much that people don't even really bring it up as much. But those 5 neighborhoods that I just told you, they're in demand for obvious reasons. They're located very well, they have good school districts, they're great family areas, and lastly, they hold their value. Even in market downturns, properties in these areas sell because there's not that many homes available, they are located well, and people want to live there. But what if you set your eye on these neighborhoods and just said to yourself, you know what, I can't afford it, I'm going to move out of the city of Toronto? Well, wait, don't move out yet. Let me give you 2 alternative neighborhoods for these 5 neighborhoods of the city that may be worth considering. My name's Tom Storey. I run a real estate team here in the city of Toronto, and we have seen so many people sell their condo, sell their townhouse to buy their first single family home in one of these 5 neighborhoods. And the reason why I'm talking about these 5 specifically is because I've seen it in my business. These are the 5 that come up the most commonly with our buyers. If you learned anything new in today's video or just find it valuable, if you could hit that like button, I'd appreciate it. Also, make sure to subscribe. And if you'd like to book a call with me or my team, you can do that in the first link in the description. Let's start with Leslieville. Leslieville, I'm telling you, is the most popular neighborhood, I am told, by buyers every time when they start their search. I say, ideally, where would you like to live? And the first thing they say is typically Leslieville. And Leslieville, even in downward trending markets, has been extremely hot for basically the last 10 years. There's not a lot of homes available. When they come up, they typically have offer dates and they sell very quickly. And my first question when people say to me, hey, we want to move to Leslieville, I say, have you considered the Danforth? So it's just northeast of Leslieville. Home prices are a lot more affordable. And I'm not saying they're cheap, right? All these other alternative neighborhoods are still expensive relative to other markets. But compared to the core market that we're talking about, they're a lot cheaper and you get more house for your money. My second recommendation, if Leslieville is out of the budget that you want to spend, would be Greenwood Coxwell area. Now, this is just north of Leslieville. It's still up and coming, but it's got a ton of trendy spots. If you just look at the average sale price, it's significantly lower. You get more house for less money, and you're still within walking distance of all the great things that Leslieville offers. The second neighborhood is the Beaches. Let's keep the east trend going here. So you want to live in the Beaches, but what you've realized is to get anything reasonable for a semi-detached house, you have to spend at least $1.5 million. And you're like, okay, I like that East End vibe, but those price points just don't make sense to me. The first alternative is kind of obvious. Let's call it Upper Beaches. So if you look at a map and you're looking at, okay, we know there's a premium if you go south of Queen. The closer you are to the water, the more expensive it is. If you go all the way up to Kingston and you go north of Kingston, right away the prices drop. So that Upper Beaches neighborhood would be my first alternative. You could also maybe say East York, but I'd say that's a completely different kind of living situation vibe of neighborhood. It's not really what you're getting with the Beaches. And then, well, what about if you just want to go a little bit more east where you're actually entering into Scarborough once you pass Victoria Park? And that's my second alternative is Birchcliff. You look at the houses you can get in Birchcliff versus what homes are selling west of Victoria Park in the Beaches. The price gap is honestly kind of astounding. Now, you're in Scarborough. Yes, that's true. But in terms of what you're getting, I think you should seriously consider taking a look. I made a video not that long ago talking about this area, saying like what areas are left in the real city of Toronto that you can get decent homes under $1 million, and most of them populated in this area. Now let's go to the west. We're talking about High Park. It makes a lot of sense why people want to live in this neighborhood. It's beautiful. You have very large old homes. You have access to absolutely everything, but it's also very expensive. So I have 2 alternatives for you. The first one is the Junction Triangle. This shouldn't be that surprising for people that know those areas. You look at the price growth that's happened in the Junction over the last 10 years. It's been massive. It's become very trendy. There's lots going on. It's become a neighborhood that a lot of people are focusing on if they can't afford the price points of High Park. And then northwest of the Junction, you got the Stockyards. That's up and coming. There's still a lot of developments happening there. They built a few condo buildings there. Obviously, it's not the same as High Park. That's why it costs less, and there's still room for growth in that neighborhood. And maybe for this video, I'd say Parkdale, but the problem with Parkdale is just the fact that, like, there's not that many semi-detached homes. So it's like all these massive, old, huge lot detached properties, and some need a ton of work. So Parkdale's technically cheaper than High Park, but because of the size of the homes, the average sale price isn't that much different. And then for Roncesvalles, Ronsey, right? Everybody wants to live in Ronsey. We have a ton of clients that live in that area, and I understand why. But it's also very expensive, like all the other neighborhoods we've talked about. So east of Ronsey, you got Brockton Village. This is an area that you can get a house at a much lower price than in Roncesvalles. And southeast of Ronsey is Dufferin Grove neighborhood. This is a good neighborhood. It's lively. Housing is a lot cheaper, and it's a decent alternative to Roncesvalles. Then the last neighborhood is North Toronto. So for the sake of it, let's call it like Yonge and Lawrence area, okay? And I think the two alternatives for this isn't even necessarily like a price point alternative. It's really just like other options to consider because they're both still expensive. I'll give you a real life example in a second. Would be Davisville Village, so a little bit more south, or Leaside. And I know Leaside has a lot of new infill housing, and some of the stuff is extremely expensive. And we actually just had clients that were looking at all three of those neighborhoods, and we had looked at many different options in many different neighborhoods. And we started the search in North Toronto, and we ended up buying in Davisville Village because we were actually able to find a property that matched our budget and our criteria. And if you look at average sale price, although the Leaside bungalows are obviously smaller houses than maybe some of the stuff in North Toronto, you look at the lot size and future potential that you could build in the future, Leaside's a decent option. I feel like this is the only example where there's somebody watching this that lives in Leaside or in Davisville Village that's like, Tom, these neighborhoods are better than North Toronto. But if you just look at average sale price, you know, they have to be looked at as alternatives as well. So there you go. I hope that was helpful, giving you two alternatives for the 5 most popular neighborhoods that at least I've seen in my business. I'd also love to know in the comments, when you were going through your housing search, did you key in on one specific neighborhood and then say, okay, well, for whatever reason, I'm not buying there, I'm going to buy here instead? Like, what was your alternative and why did you end up buying in a neighborhood that was different from where you were starting your search? Thank you so much for watching. My name's Tom Storey, and remember, home is where your story begins.